Hello, world. It's Deanna. I'm back with Nurko and our Recovery Uncut podcast. Today I have a special guest. Yay! Her name is Stephanie Rosales. She represents the Lake County Health Department, and I'll let her give you guys a little more background information on who she really is.
Hi everyone, I'm happy to be here. My name is Stephanie Rosales. I do work at the Lake County Health Department. I'm part of the substance abuse program and I'm the community health educator for the program.
Okay, thank you. I just got a couple questions. I know you've visited NERCO now twice and gave us a wonderful, wonderful NARCAN training, NARCAN, aka naloxone training, and I got some good information. As I was saying before, this training was actually I learned something, so thank you for that. You know, it's valuable. Yeah. And then this is something that is definitely needed in our community. So again, thank you and kudos to the work you're doing out there. Now I just wanted to ask a couple questions, get the audience just to understand kind of, you know, what it is and what it looks like from your point of view. So my first question is, I would like to know what would because I know, you know, you guys have the grant funding, and I know sometimes in funding cases, like you have the desire to want to do so much more, but you know, it's kind of limited sometimes. So I would like to know, like, what would the perfect system, as far as the naloxone or the Narcan, go from your point of view?
Yeah, that's a great question. And like to kind of touch on the grant aspect. So like for my program, I work under the SOAR grant, which stands for the State Opioid Response Grant. I'm really thankful for this grant because the parameters of it is essentially, you know, take care of your county, of your community, do your best to educate on the benefits of Narcan, you know, what substance use disorder is, you know, some of the options to go into recovery, but also to distribute harm reduction tools, right? The Narcan, the fentanyl, the xylazine. So I'm really, you know, because I agree with you, there are some grants where it's like, you know, you have these ideas, but the limitations of what you have to be working within kind of restricts the outreach or the impact you can really have or what you really want to do. Thankfully, I think mine is, you know, just really, again, centered around educate and distribute and do your best to take care of your community. So when I think about an ideal or perfect system, I think for me, and I talk about this in my training, is like I would love for the destigmatization of Narcan to happen, right? So when I go into community spaces and I talk about the benefit of having Narcan on the premise, a lot of the times they say, well, this doesn't happen here. Or like, oh, we don't need that. Or, oh, I don't know anybody that uses. And so ideas of like, this isn't needed is still so prominent in Lake County. It's still so prominent in our nation, right? So I think for, you know, implementation sense, right? So for me to be able to make sure that anywhere where the community goes, I want Narcan to be there. I want Narcan to be accessible. So I think for an organization to have a conversation about, you know, how can we best show our community that this would positively impact having it on the premise, positively impact having people trained, right? Positively impact the people who we might not know are going through substance use disorder, right? So I think tackling the stigmatization would be so important for not only what I could do for my program, but what other organizations can do for, you know, naloxone saturation. Something else I'd probably say is the accessibility to be greater, right? Kind of going hand in hand. So like I do my best, like I said, to always make sure that if the community gathers somewhere, that I want to make sure that Narcan is there. So my better efforts is always making sure I'm thinking of like, where else can I go? Where else can I serve? And especially going back to when we look at the coroner's report, we do see those 5 communities that are most impacted by substance use disorder or by opioid related incidences. And so for me, I always try to think about like, how can I make Narcan more accessible in those communities? So in an ideal way, I would love for them to not be stigmatized, but also to the accessibility be almost more casual, right? Just almost have it, you know, in vending machines or have it on the desk in libraries for people to grab, right? So ideally, those are kind of the things that I wish I could impact more so that the system can kind of just be more ingrained in our society and our community.
Okay, thank you. That's good. Of course, you know, NERCO, that's one of our goals, missions is always to reduce that stigma. So doing that with the NARCAN definitely, I think would be a good, step forward in the distribution, in people accepting it. Like you said, just want them to accept it. I don't think that people really know how to even, like, you walk in somewhere and just to, like you said, see it sitting in the library. I don't even think people that are not in this type of, work or in this type of community know the benefits of it, And so for you to say that is, it speaks volumes on what work we still have to do, what Absolutely. Things we still have to work towards. And again, the reason for things like this, just sometimes just saying it and getting people to understand, like, this is needed. This is going to help you, essentially. It's going to save your life. Yeah, it's going to save your life. So Absolutely. I like that. Do you think, I know you work for the Lake County Health Department. So do you think that that Lake County efforts are like the best they could be with what they have?
Yeah, so we specifically talking about substance use, we have a couple of departments, and so I grew up in Lake County my entire life. I've lived in Lake County, but I had no idea about all the programs and also all of the resources that Lake County Health Department provides. And so now working for this institution, I realized that one, we're a massive institution. We have more than 1,000 employees, so we're super big, and that trails across all different types of departments. But when I think about that, we have the privilege of being a very big institution that does have the privilege of getting all these grants or all these funds to help us do the work that we signed up to pledge ourselves to, right? And so thinking about that, I, without being biased, I do think the Lake County Health Department does a really great job in tackling different, issues within our community the best that we can. And going back to substance use disorder, we have the substance abuse program, we have the addictions treatment program, we have the women's residential services, the A Way Out program, the child behavioral and adolescence program, also known as CABS. So all these programs that are aimed for different niches of communities, right? So the women's residential services is just for women or people who identify as women, and CABS is aimed towards our adolescent groups. And, so all of these, centered programs pertaining to substance use, we have so many different departments, and looking at the grand scale of that, talking and collaborating with my colleagues, I get to see some of the work that they get to do through their grants, and I'm always so amazed that the right people are doing the right work in my eyes. So I talk and learn so much from my colleagues because some of them have lived experience, some of them have been doing this for so long, some of them have this passion. So putting that all together, I feel like it creates an organization that is centered around serving the community the best that we can. And again, using our privilege as a big institution and putting that to work for the community, right? So taking, this big institution and making it to serve the community, I think is what we try to do, and I think we do it well. And I think, we always try to think about what else can we do, instead of being stagnant, right? Just being like, well, we've already accomplished this, so that's where we stay. I think the health department is always trying to think about who else can we collaborate with? Where else can we better serve people? What programs need a bit more help, right? And where can we continue raising up our organization so that it better serves Lake County? So don't want to sound biased, but I really do think that the Lake County Health Department has the right people, has the privilege of having the funds, and we do our best to, again, serve the public, which is Lake County.
Okay, and thank you so much for that, because that's good work, and like you said, hats off to the people that are putting their boots to the ground in this. And I didn't even know you guys had that many single programs, but all allocated around substance use and abuse, and that's great to know, and again, the community gets this little piece of jewel dropped on them, and they know, if they need those type of services or family members need those type of services, they have a place that they can go and feel helped,
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think I'd like to know if it were, with the routine that you guys have and the scheduling and how you guys plan to, go into these different spaces, if there was one thing that you could maybe take away, what do you think that would be? And I know that's kind of playing like devil's advocate a little bit, but it's kind of like,
I think this is my... So I started with the health department in April, and I've already learned so much about how different organizations function, right? Mm-hmm. How sometimes the bureaucracy can get in, can stop things from happening, right? Mm-hmm. So, sometimes you need permission up the ladder, and sometimes that can get lost in translation. So I think, if I could take something away, I think I would just take the bureaucracy, the kind of, power struggle that sometimes happens with making decisions, or with, maybe, giving the okay to something, but then not to another thing, right? So I sometimes feel because we're such a big institution, we have so many hands and people in play, right? That sometimes, it can get kind of, a bit of a power struggle of well, this person said yes, but this person thinks that it's not. So there's just a lot of sometimes, opinions and ways of doing something, right? The, way an institution is made. So if I could take something away, I would just make, it a bit more collaborative in general, right?
A little more simple.
Yeah, take away a bit of, the hierarchy and power sometimes that comes into big organizations, and center it back into what are we doing and what's the best way to do it, right? So taking kind of that ego out and just making it again more about who are we serving and what do they need and how can we do that, right? So it's just kind of all these little bureaucracies, I would say, is the best word I can probably say to it, but that's what I would take out.
Is it kind of like a fact versus opinion thing, or maybe even allowing the people that are actually out here doing the work to kind of make those decisions based... Okay, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, a little bit of that. It's just kind of sometimes people have, authorities that we take guidance from, right? Or have to get certain permissions from because they earn that, that spot of having the authority. But, a lot of the times it's kind of the group or the people out doing the work might have a different vision for something, or maybe a different process of doing something, but we always have to align it back to how is our organization functioning, and what rules and stuff are established because of whatever reasons, and what does
policies and procedures,
right.
Yeah.
What do we have to follow, and how can we do our work the best way in those constraints, right?
Okay.
So that's what I would take away, but that's also an ideal world. So I try to remember, we sometimes have rules and policies for a reason, but my heart's always with the people. So how can I serve my people the best, right?
Yeah, that's definitely good. So I know you do the NARCAN trainings throughout the community, and a lot of people are informed, but if you had just 3 key things to kind of, let's just say you had 3 seconds or 10 seconds to explain to somebody, the best thing to make the NARCAN be able to, be accessible, or for them to be able to say, oh yeah, this is good,
Yeah, that's a great question. I would probably come down to these 3 things. In my trainings, I always say, before you use NARCAN, know these things. It is safe. And when I say it's safe, I mean it's safe to administer on someone who's elderly, it's safe to administer on someone who's pregnant, it's safe to administer on a child, even though I hope you never have to do that. It's safe to even administer to someone who doesn't have opioids in their system, right? Okay. So NARCAN won't have any negative effects on someone who doesn't have opioids in their system. So when we're assessing an emergency, and maybe you forget all the telltale signs of what an opioid overdose looks like, right? You can't remember some of those things. It's still safe to administer NARCAN to cover all your bases, right? Be like, hey, you know what? I can't tell they're clammy. I can't see if they have pinpoint-sized pupils. I don't know if their heart rate or blood pressure's down. So I'm just going to administer NARCAN knowing that it's safe. It's not going to cause any more harm to someone. But if someone is under the influence of opioids, it's only going to help them.
That just reminded me of, I play a lot of cards and we play spades, and it's like, if you're not paying attention and your partner throws out a card, it's like, just go big or go home. Just take it anyway, just because, you're trying to win, and essentially with the Narcan, we trying to save these people. Exactly. So that's good. I like that.
You know what I mean? Like, yeah, cover your bases. Like, know the facts, right? It's safe, right? Mm-hmm. And something else I would mention is that, a lot of people don't realize, but Narcan was created to reverse the respiratory depression that happens with opioid overdoses. So when someone is entering into an opioid overdose, their heart rate goes down, their blood pressure, their body temp, even their breathing can stop, right? And so a while ago, we were seeing with the opioid epidemic that people were just dying because we could not restart their breathing, right? Mm-hmm. Like we could, not do it as effectively as this medication can. So my biggest thing that I always tell people is, like, if you administer Narcan and that person starts breathing, but maybe they still have clammy skin, or maybe they, haven't become conscious, the medication did its job. If it starts breathing again, then it did its job, and you're giving that person the best chance to enter into recovery, right? So, know it's safe, know that it was meant specifically to reverse the effects of respiratory depression. And the last one that I think is really important is, it's important to stay with the person, right? So, another thing that I touch on in my trainings is, if you administer Narcan and that person wakes up, they start breathing, they're like, I'm fine, like, I don't need to go to the hospital, still call 911 and still stay with this person, because they have a 30 to 90 minute window, right? So the Narcan is letting their body be normal for 30 to 90 minutes, but all of those opioids that are still in that person's system are still there. So once that 30 to 90 minutes is over, that person will just re-overdose. Or worse, they, were given Narcan and are feeling the withdrawal effects that come after that, and they just want to use again. So, when we use Narcan, just make sure that we're staying with the person so that they can get handed off to proper care and better long-term care, right? So with Narcan, know it's safe to use. Know that it was really meant, and its main focus is to reverse the effects of respiratory depression, and you want to stay with the person after administering Narcan. That way you can make sure that they're okay and that they get to better help.
Okay. And I think maybe you touched on this in your training, about the legal part of that. So a lot of times when you think about someone overdosing and staying there until law enforcement gets there, or the ambulance, most people want to run. They don't want to be, around to experience that portion of it. Is there laws that protect the individual that stays around?
Yeah, so I know of the Good Samaritan law, and the Good Samaritan law essentially encourages everyday people to take action when they see something, right? So if someone was to come across an emergency, the Good Samaritan law encourages them to, help in the situation the best way they can. Now, coming back to the legality of it, right? So like if you're with someone who, has some opioid on them and you call 911, are you going to get in trouble for the opioids? And that's a really great question. I think, at some point, I think the Good Samaritan law plays an effect, right? So if you're with someone and they start overdosing and you call 911, like, you're looking out for the well-being of that person, right? Like you're calling 911 because you want to make sure that person gets into better care, that they get the help they need, that they get to, stay alive, right? And so the Good Samaritan law, encourages you to do something and say something, because, the bystander effects is, very prominent in our society. Like, it's so easy for us to freeze and watch something happen instead of taking action.
Exactly.
So the Good Samaritan law, again, encourages you, and it does protect you from retaliation of that person. So, like, let's say, I always use in my trainings, for example, you start performing CPR and you unfortunately maybe crack a rib as you're performing CPR. The person that you were trying to save, right, but unintentionally hurt along the way of doing that, can't come back and sue you. So, going back to like the drug portion of that question, I'm not 100% sure. I would love for law enforcement to not, criminalize a good act.
Loosen the ropes on that, so that people have that support.
So they're also encouraged, right? So they're not afraid to say, hey, like, my friend just used, and maybe there's still some around here, but their life matters more than, the idea of maybe getting legal consequences for that. So I that kind of goes into a whole other thing, but I definitely know that the Good Samaritan law encourages people to do something when they see something. And hopefully with that, the emphasis of taking care of our community is at the forefront of that, right? So it's like we encourage people to keep taking care of each other because we know that the law encourages us to.
And then again, one more thing, because I like I said, I took the training. It was great.
Oh, yeah.
What did you mention about? Was a hotline or something that when people are using, they can call? I thought that was great information. Could you just go a little bit on that for me?
Sure, yeah. And this is something that I learned about and I also thought was amazing, but it's essentially a hotline called Never Use Alone. And essentially it's what it says. It's like when someone is actively using, a lot of the times overdose happens because someone goes into an overdose, but there's not another person there to administer Narcan, right? Because when you're entering into an overdose, you might not have the capacity to self-administer Narcan to yourself, right? Especially once you go unconscious or, your body's kind of struggling. So Never Use Alone is a free hotline where anyone who wants to use, especially solo, can call, and they basically stay on the line with someone who makes sure that they go through the entire process of them using to make sure that they survive it, right? So it's a really great harm reduction tool because I always tell people it's not my job to tell people not to do drugs. It's my job to tell people to be safe and give them the resources they need to stay safe. So Never Use Alone is a great resource for people who don't use in a group, right? They just use by themselves. And because someone who enters into an overdose can't call 911 and can't, administer Narcan to themselves, the people on the other end of this line will, keep asking if you're okay, ask you what you're doing, you'll update them on when you're going to start using, and then they'll stay on the line until you're finished, right? And if something does happen to you, they have your address, they have your description, because I think you have to tell all these things before you start using, but you give them all this information so that if something happens to you, they're on the phone with 911 telling them your address, what you look like, and the fact that you're in need of care. And so it kind of streamlines emergency services to people who use alone. And a lot of the times, this really tackles one of the things is when people use alone, they have a higher chance of overdosing and not recovering, right? So this hotline is really centered around, hey, we just want to make sure you're safe, and we want to make sure that you have someone there looking out for your well-being. So it's a great service. It's free.
Yes.
And I love finding resources like that, right? Because it's really about not judging someone, but taking care of them where they are.
Being able, to meet them where they are. Exactly. Because even in the recovery field, you can't stop people from doing what they want to do.
Absolutely.
They're not going to stop until they're ready. So why not? Let's figure out a way to, like you said, meet them where they are. That is good. And then lastly, I just want to wrap it up with, where can individuals go to find out your next schedule, where site or where you'll be or?
Yeah. So I am partnering with the Waukegan Public Library to offer a free community training. And I'm hoping, we are still in talks about setting up a date, but I know it's going to be in spring or summer, and it's just open to the community. So, anyone that wants to learn about Narcan or, has questions about it or really just wants to be informed, I'll be partnering with the Waukegan Public Library to have, again, a free community Narcan training. But if there's anyone who, wants to go through the same training that you did and can't make it to Waukegan Public Library or is just, again, curious, on the Lake County Health Department site, under where it says naloxone saves, we do have a training inquiry form. So, a lot of the times I'll sometimes get organizations that are like, oh, we just ordered Narcan, but we also realize we don't know the full facts or what, how to use everything. So they'll go on our website and then they'll just essentially, put who they are, that they're interested in training, and then I'll reach out to them and schedule something with them. So if anyone listening now, feel free to contact the Lake County Health Department. I know NARCO's now fully trained, so you guys can perform trainings. And I think you guys are coming out with some really cool stuff about virtual trainings, which I think is great, especially for accessibility portions of it, right? So people that want to be trained and doing it in the comforts of their home, that's really cool. But for my part, they can either inquire through the website or they can wait for the community training that'll happen in the Waukegan Public Library.
Okay, is that community training with Waukegan, is that going to be like a reoccurring thing? Or are you guys just going to try to trial and error and just kind of see how it goes?
We're going to trial and error, and I'm hoping to also provide one in Spanish too. So that's kind of like the little trial that we're doing because I'm Latina, so I, realize that there's a lot of like barriers sometimes with, the Latino community.
Yeah, so that inclusion is definitely important. It's going to be
important.
nice.
So I think, in Waukegan we have a really great, diverse, Latino community. And so we're hoping to, of course, do one in English, but also potentially offer one in Spanish. And it is kind of a trial thing because I know with Waukegan Public Library, I love them. They're amazing. I've trained them, but sometimes getting community members to come to something can be a bit hard. So we're really hoping that we can, spread the word and let people know. Again, free resource, free things. And I always give out NARCAN and fentanyl test strips during my trainings. That way people walk home with the things that we talked about, right? So yeah, look out for Waukegan Public Library. I'm not sure when the schedule will happen. I think it's like end of spring, beginning of summer. And I'm hoping to do one in English and Spanish.
And that'll be good too. And maybe we can talk further about our warm handoff program that's starting up. And they pass out like care packages and different things like that in the community. So maybe when you guys do that, we can get some of our outreach crew there and passing out those bags and just, making everybody feel welcome. And again, like you said, destigmatizing NARCAN, which I think is very great.
Yeah, I'd love to talk to you about that.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And I'm pretty sure we'll cross paths again.
Oh, absolutely.
And thank you for getting on the Pod Talk with us.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, guys. We hope you enjoyed it. See you later.